Welcome to the International Roundtable Discussion on Relationship, featuring Francesco Cani, podcaster, coach and relationship expert from the UK, Reverend Jeeva Sam, marriage mentor and co-author of The Unbreakable Marriage from Canada, and Henry Nwaneri, lead pastor at Jesus House International, Atlanta, Georgia, and author of The Heart of a True Lover. In this episode, our speakers will discuss the impact of cultures on relationship. Happy viewing and happy listening.
Good morning, America. Good afternoon, Europe. Good evening, Asia. I'm Francesco Cani, and I have the honor and pleasure to be talking to Jeeva and Henry, who are going to introduce themselves straight after I do that. I'm a relationship counselor. I've been based in the UK for half of my life. I'm originally Italian. I'm passionate about improving the relationship between men and women. I happen to work mostly with heterosexual couples, not by choice. And that makes me even more passionate about improving the relationship between the opposite genders. So my longing and desires for this chat with Jeeva and Henry today is to discuss gender differences, how to improve the relationship between men and women, and how cultural values, different cultural values from different backgrounds can help. Can we learn from each other's cultures? Can we learn from traditional cultures, including the religious ones? Can we trust the future and secular society that could eventually build a model of a family that is as stable and healthy as perhaps some of the traditional ones, assuming that men and women were happy in traditional societies. So that's me.
All right, so my name is Jeeva Sam. My wife Slojana and I, we are marriage mentors based in Canada. And we actually guarantee breakthrough for married couples facing breakdown in as little as 10 weeks. And we've been mentoring couples since 2016. And our marriage was actually an arranged marriage. So you talk about the culture playing such a big role. And so I want to share some of the aspects of being part of an arranged marriage and how we have grown in that marriage, as well as what we would generally call Western culture, for whom arranged marriage is not the norm. What are some things that we can learn from our experience? So yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
And my name is Henry. I am Canadian. I'm presently stationed in Atlanta, Georgia. We just planted a ministry here. And I've also just authored a book on relationship. It's called The Heart of a True Lover. We're putting together this discussion because we felt that at the core of relationship and the issues of relationship these days is the issue of there's a little bit of a touch of cultural difference. And I shared with Francesco that I was looking at some numbers, and you can tell that some cultures are enjoying more stability in their relationship that have not been touched by, should I say, the Western culture? I don't want to stigmatize the Western culture, but we felt that it would be a fun thing to have this discussion. And this thing. Oh, and by the way, I'm hoping for an arranged marriage, and Pastor Jeeva is organizing that. I'm just kidding. But nice to meet you guys.
Thank you, Jeeva and Henry. So I also enjoy to go with the flow where the conversation take us within the boundaries agreed. So in terms of cultural differences impacting marriages and family compositions, I look up to cultures such as the Indian culture, or Jewish culture, to some extent Japanese culture, who opened to they go through historical periods of completely opening to the West whilst maintaining the roots, so completely keeping the West complete away from them. Italian culture, which is my culture of origin, in the 80s got very Americanized very quickly, which meant that our traditional values, family-based traditional values, and based on Catholicism, obviously, just didn't resist and were not strong enough. And so we sort of imported very superficially sort of North American values from Hollywood movies. So, and when I was in India, I was struck that there was some generations that went, even influential people from YouTube that had, who belonged to the first generation of love marriage. So we're already sort of saying, wait a second, there's a lot of positives in arranged marriages, because two communities are really, really wanting to keep the unit together, and you get support from them. But from an individualistic point of view, I guess a lot of my clients will say, well, is that support or pressure that you can't escape? Divorce is not an option. I wonder whether Jeeva can comment on that.
So just to give a little bit of background, our family moved to Canada in 1976. So I was already here for 7 years. In 1983, when I went home, and that's when our marriage was arranged. So I already had a taste of what it is like to be, in the Western world. And of course, I'm pastoring to congregations that are like 100% white. And so the weddings that I'm doing, everything is what I would have called love marriages, which of course is just regular marriage here. So when I went home and made the choice that I would, agree to an arranged marriage, that my parents, would find somebody for me. It was a very different. So it was quite a shock to my people back home meaning in Canada, saying like, how could you do that after living in this country for this many years and seeing, how things are done? How could you simply, go along with what your parents propose? And one of the things that I had to make very clear is that in an arranged marriage, the families have the best interest of their children at heart, and children are not forced to enter into a marriage that they don't want to. It was likely in the very early days that especially the women didn't have a choice. The fathers, found the match for them, and that was it. They just expected to be that way. But today, as a matter of fact, in India, things have changed considerably, even since we got married. And so for me, because I was already steeped in the culture for 18 years of my life before moving to Canada, it still seemed a very natural thing to do. And that's really, I think, the big difference, Francisco, is rather than as an individual making a choice, your family helps you make that choice. And one of the things that they do, they take into considerations a lot more than what we as individuals do, because we can make decisions based on attraction, or status, like whatever the case may be. But the families, they're looking long term, and they know the children better than anybody else. So when they make a choice, those choices, turn out to be the right ones more often than not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I'm actually involved in a conference going on in Nigeria now, and one of the things I've been asked to do is to look into what the Bible says about cultural differences, or to figure out where the cultures or how the cultures have been influenced by Western civilization. And strangely, I talked with one of the guests yesterday, and we discovered that we haven't even taken note of how Western culture influenced the Bible. And I started making a list of areas that the Western culture has influenced, for instance, just biblical wedding. And I was amazed, even just from the Song of Solomon, how I could pick out at least 16. I have a list of about 16 areas that the Western culture has influenced the Bible. And I gave one good example, based on what we're talking about now, is even in the culture of it wasn't set in stone that the man chased the woman, for instance, which is the beginning. And what that led to is what we call the entitlement culture in relationships. And I don't know if anybody has anything to say about it. So the woman was entitled to being chased and being given everything, money, food, and everything she desired, covering. And some of it was real, and some of it are still in a part of the Bible culture. But then it transferred to so many other things. And the man was supposed to give this, give this, give this. And some of it was from the past. So that's one of the things we've looked at, how entitlement culture has become a part of what the relationship culture is now and where it came from. There were certain things that were, I don't even think it was just families that married in the past. Where I come from, it was a society thing. If your family loved the daughter of another family, other families will tell you, oh, don't you know that the father was like this? Don't you know that the mother was like this? And it was a cultural thing. And that kind of settled a lot of things in the personality or caliber of the people that were being married, because the eyes of the society were on the families that were looking to put the covenant of marriage together for their children. So I think it was more than a family thing. And there was no entitlement to it. It was, if you had, like, even in the Bible, Mary was expected to be a virgin. And the family of Joseph was a good family that when they didn't meet up, he considered the society when he was trying to put her away. So fun topic, fun things to look at. We're going to look at all of that. Maybe we'll have multiple sessions of this, bring this discussion to a full.
So yeah, arranged marriage wasn't alien to Western, hasn't been alien at all to Western culture either. And the importance of community and putting the individual right in the center of a community. Is that wise? What I'm hearing is that we humans have done it for a long part of the history, maybe the longest part of the history. And I'm sure this has biological implications. Aren't we inherently sociable animals? I hear that the Dunbar number for the ideal community size has been talked about more frequently recently. That makes sense to me. Whether the number, I don't remember now, is somewhere in the region between 147 individuals or 200. And then apparent individuals have spent most of their existence, human beings, in those sizes, and that means that you know everyone well enough. You know your neighbors. I guess I'm not a scientist, I'm not a sociologist, I'm not a historian, but as a relationship counselor, I can only comment on the opposite of that. The opposite of that is the nuclear family. And I think, without being too biased, I feel the nuclear family is struggling at the moment. So it's not uncommon in Western societies not to know your neighbors, not to live nearby your in-laws and parents, or even if you are, not to get on with them. It's very common in England to make jokes about not looking forward to Christmas. being the only time you're going to spend with your in-laws or parents, and even that one time you're not looking forward to it. And behind humor, there's always some truth. This is my last bit in this segment. This is meaning that women are needing, hoping to get so much from one person, their man, and the same men are looking to get satisfaction and fulfillment and affection all from one person, whereby in the past there was the whole community, even if your husband is not the best communicators, it doesn't necessarily become a reason for divorce, because you get your needs met with other community members.
Yeah, well, that is very true. I think that's definitely true of the Indian culture. I was just thinking when you were talking about the community helping with the decision, back in the days when you didn't have the internet or social media to go and check somebody out, you relied on the community to provide you with that information. You sure you want to marry your daughter into that family? Did you know their history? So you got all the intel you needed, from the community. Whereas today it's a very, very different way of approaching it. Although it's really interesting that communities are still close, but not necessarily geographically anymore. However, communities keep in touch. We build community online now. From my perspective, I've seen the church community, often play a big role because the church communities are usually smaller in number, and so where there's a lot of interaction between members, you do get to know each other, and so there are certain cultures, and Henry can relate to this because we know some of the Nigerian churches in common, where the pastors often are involved in the process of helping their young people choose their mates. And again, it's because in that context of community, they get to know this person well, even though their family may be away. So I think the community still plays a role, in a significant way. But again, it's only in some cultures when you're very individualistic and you really focus on, well, I know what is best for me. I don't care what you say, and refusing to take input from others, or even when somebody else puts up a red flag, just to ignore it. Of course, we can't help anybody like that because they don't value that quite as much. However, where you have that sense that your community also has a part to play along with your family, and then that can prove to be very valuable in making what for most people will be the most important decision of their life.
I came across some data just about 4 or 5 days ago, and I don't know if the intentions of the data were, what I thought they were, but it was interesting. And even in the UK now, because of the conflict of cultures, there had been some situation, and I think the Prime Minister is looking into it. He set up a committee. I don't know if you know about that, Francesco. Set up a committee, and kind of stood firm on it, and I think it was the United Nations that sponsored a study that is looking at how different cultures react when they come into the Western world, and what it is leading to. Because in the UK, there's been this, not just in the UK, it's almost everywhere, there's been just a preponderance of rape and abuse, the technical term. And shockingly, a lot of things came out of that study that they weren't looking for originally. I think the first thing that came out is that depending on the age of the people and depending on certain influences in their lives, they tend to have been a little bit more Western and more desirous of Western culture influence than the average person, So I think the age cutoff was 37. People above 37 just naturally held a little bit more to their culture compared to those who were younger than 37. And people who maintained some social media contact, Facebook, Twitter, and top on the list was TikTok, had came into the Western world with a lot more zest and acceptance of what the Western culture was offering. And strangely, I want to add this and maybe see what anybody can say about it. Strangely, if there was anything negative, carried across culture, it came amongst those who are younger than 37. And the trajectory, according to them, is leading to a high rate of promiscuity and a high rate of divorce, based on what they are projecting from that. So it's not just even a cultural thing, but even the multicultural aspect of it, we're not sure where that what do I call it, where that mix is leading to. And I don't know who or how we're going to anchor this issue, because if there's no anchor, the tendency is that it's going to go crazy. There needs to be at least an anchor. I don't know if it's a cultural anchor or a cultural mix anchor, but something has to happen, and I don't know that the United Nations knows exactly what to do. But the Prime Minister of UK is already looking into it, and he has set up a committee, I don't know how that will turn out, but we're keeping our eyes on it.
This discussion will continue in a moment. Please stay tuned. Welcome back to the roundtable discussion on relationship.
That's really fascinating, all these factors that play a part in westernization of individuals and communities, and what does play a part. All of a sudden, what came up for me was my father was studied in the seminary to become a Catholic priest from age 10 to age 20, and then left and got married when he was 28 years old. But then he became very liberal with me and my two brothers, and he didn't want to impose the tradition on us. And you could see that he was sad, somewhat sad, and slightly disappointed, but he tried not to show that his disappointment on us. So I respected him for that, but I always had mixed feelings. I always also looked up to, again, cultures such as the Indian and the Jewish culture, where you are proud to follow your father's roots. There's something really appealing about what they are carrying culturally. But for me, it was less appealing because my father was a part of he had immigrated to a capital of Italy, so he wasn't part of a community. So I couldn't see the charismatic and wisdom aspects of what my father's cultural background was offering. Again, my local church was not one that I found appealing. So I didn't have the role models. Like I say, I can only explain it with the Americanization of, incredibly fast Americanization of Italian society. I suppose I'm really sort of longing to ask Jeeva, what makes a Western Indian young person look up to the fathers and mothers and feel, I am proud to belong to this lineage. I want to continue carrying this forward.
I think a lot of it has to do with how well for example, a family like ours that left India and then planted themselves in another country, in our case, Canada, and same thing with people that have gone to America, which a lot of Indians have. Those who have continued to value the culture, and when I talk about culture, it could be celebrations, cultural celebrations, family traditions, food traditions, like all of these, and even keeping in touch with family back home in terms of special occasions and so on. Where the Indian culture has been inculcated into their children, then one of the things that comes with it, is the respect for your parents. It's generally respect for your elders in India, which is like very, very, a very, very high core value. That anybody that is older than you, like you look up to them, and you serve them basically. And so your parents are at the top of that list. And so the word of your parents, carries a lot of weight, even though you're not living in that culture anymore. And but where parents have done what you just described about your father, where they have basically said, well, we're living in a different country now, we can't continue to, impose those values on our kids because they're going to be influenced by these values anyway. And having a little bit lax about it, lose that authority, for as parents. And so then it becomes a more of a difficult battle, to get those values back into the children. In my case, even though we came here, I went straight to university, and so in some ways, my parents didn't have that same kind of influence within the household, but it was built enough inside of me that when it came to like a lot of the decisions that I made, I was still making them as an Indian, because my parents had modeled that for me in my growing up years. And so I think in some ways, some of those values, like even children who are raised, as Indians in Western culture, still have some of those values. That like because we notice that now when we're now interacting with the second and third generation of Indians, who are living in the U.S. and Canada, they still treat us like for example, me, without knowing who I am, without any reference to me being pastor, which of course was another one that they will hold in high esteem, simply like looking up, and of course I don't know if you experience this or not, but if there's an elder who's not your father or mother, they become your uncle or auntie. And so uncle, what do you think? They value that. And so but in my case, I think my parents still were very conservative, in their values. However, they were liberal in their practices, so it was like nobody was forbidden from hanging out, with people of, like white folks, simply because they did certain things that were not acceptable to the Indian culture, because they knew this is where we had to live and make our living. And so they prepared us for that without being restrictive. However, the values were deep down inside that, and our children, all born, here in Canada and raised in this milieu, still have those values. I see that evident in them, even though they're all our youngest is going to be turned 30 this year, and the other two are in their 30s. So there is a way that you can continue to pass that on to your coming generations, even though you're not still steeped in the same cultural milieu as you would have been back in your homeland.
I've been wondering where that change or that influence is coming from. Of course, it's easy to blame the usual suspects, but uh, it's, I wonder what that influence is, where it's coming from, the root of it. Pastor Jeeva alluded to certain things, for instance, when Nigerians move into a place, we kind of congregate towards each other, but I have seen a lot of change in it. And with that change, I've also seen a lot of um, value changes, which is, I think, the most dramatic change that you will see in all the numbers. If you look at the numbers, the value changes. For instance, how much are you committed to a relationship without the consideration of divorce from the get-go. The value has dropped seriously, for instance, and for some reason, people are okay with the drop in the value. There were, I think, 3 others where the value change was very prominent. For instance, how much are you, in the past, it used to be something of, not a shame, but it wasn't good if you had children and the father or the mother was not there, but now it is almost as admirable as being married and with children to have your children alone. There's even a group of the society that is, if there's a way to have children, have a contract with somebody, have children, and then that's it. There's no marriage and relationship that follows. So those value changes. For instance, how much of what's the word I'm looking for? How much are you against a divorce in the relationship? The value change was huge in that area. Some percent of people who went into a marriage felt it doesn't matter if we get a divorce after a few years, if we've enjoyed our lives together. So those value changes are kind of things that, I'm going back to the last point I made, that an anchor kind of has to correct that. If we don't have a yardstick, or a mode of saying that number is too high, we're leaving it now to the consent or to the wishes of the people. And once value is tagged to the wishes of the people, forgive me for being prejudiced about this, I think that's what the Bible brings. I think that's what Christianity should bring to people, to kind of anchor it, because cultures now are kind of transient, with the kind of influence we're talking about. There's no culture that is dominant or is so self-protecting that it survives what's going on. The world is becoming a global village, which is why I go back to, there's only one culture that has something written down that we can all look at and say, okay, let's go back to what that culture feels like and kind of correct the things we're seeing that we've inadvertently allowed values to change and things to affect what we read. At some point, even I think Christianity was having more divorce rate than the secular world, because I think there was an instance where the Christianity was feeling we've got to be the more accepting culture, if I use that word for it, and I think we suffered for it. But hopefully we turn around and be an anchor or help anchor humanity to some good values.
Thank you, Harry. Before Jeeva leaves us, I just want to say, and he's going to leave us in 5 minutes, something that maybe Jeeva can respond before he goes to, and I think is indirectly related to what Harry was talking about. What are the boundaries? If you're buying into monogamy, then are you committed to monogamy? Otherwise, you're buying into it, but not really buying into it, and is so there isn't a woman talking today, and I hope that this dialogue will be the first of a series, because I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I just feel like if we add one more element to the table, and then in following episodes we can elaborate on it. Feminism, which is something that is obviously part.
Oh boy, Francesco.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's not something for the last 5 minutes. I agree. I agree. But I'm just aware 3 men have been talking about some of the pros of traditional societies, but the 3 of us, I believe, have an open mind about the future and a hope about the future. We're not set in stone with how things should be to be healthy. But I suppose maybe next time we can talk about the role of women in more traditional societies, because I feel if a woman is listening to this and is a secular woman and is not interested in, reviving traditions from the past. Yeah, would she feel that we want to corner her in a setup that is not good for her?
I'm laughing because in my own marriage, we're on the verge of celebrating our 40th anniversary, and we often joke about it that I wish that I had the wife that first came to Canada before she was corrupted by Canadian society. And again, it's been in some ways it's been really great to see her evolve because again we cannot generalize for the entire Indian culture anymore because women are asserting themselves more within marriages, and at one time that would have been like totally condemned and looked down upon, and there would have been repercussions for that woman, and that it's still, I'm sure that it still is the case in certain parts of the Indian society, and especially back home in India. However, like to me, I think with our marriage, I would say we're probably closer to what Paul said about submit yourselves one to another out of reverence for Christ, and then wives submit to your husbands. So the mutual submission is something that we have held as a high value in our marriage. But we didn't start out that way, but that's where we have moved to. And so there are ways in which you can still continue to honor and respect, in terms of what your culture teaches, what your tradition teaches. In our case, a very conservative biblical tradition, without somehow squelching or squashing somebody's individuality, without oppressing, especially the women in family settings, and still, like you're living in the Western culture, but you're still maintaining your cultural and your religious values without compromise. So I think there is a way, and would love to elaborate on that another time that we are together.
Thank you for your time today. It was a pleasure meeting you and talking to you.
Thank you for the opportunity. I look forward to doing it again. All right. God bless. Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
Henry, shall we have a closing 15 minutes?
Sure.
Something of that nature?
Yeah. I think we've had very rousing discussion, and maybe further down the road we might look at bringing in some women, and make it some form of roundtable discussion and see how it goes. The issue of feminism, I don't think we can start it and finish it in 15 minutes, so we're probably, and just to be safe and to be smart, we're not going to look at just feminism. We'll look at maybe one other issue, so it's a woman wouldn't feel attacked, but I will guarantee, or I think it's right to say that feminism is top 3 of the issues that has influenced relationship and marriage, and what that has done is to change expectations, change marriage values, and literally change the trajectory that relationships have been moving in. Certainly, feminism is one of it. Sadly, though, usually something should have an end, so when you start off, when feminism comes in, it should have a goal, and the goal should be the emancipation of the woman, the rights of the woman, so to say. But now feminism is kind of dying under the weight of, let me use the very more modern term, fluidity, so where you fought for a woman's right in the past, you're now fighting for the right of, let me put it differently, and I'm going to say this with a little bit of sarcasm. You wanted to free the woman from the man until you came to the point where you wanted to free the man to become the woman, so it's kind of a mixed, going around a cyclical thing, and it does, and for some reason, those, I'm not sure if I've seen any numbers on this, but it's becoming obvious that those who were staunch feminists have become silent at the new incursion of fluidity, where the battle that we fought to free the woman seems to be yielding to a battle we're fighting now to free somebody else who wants to be called a woman. That's where we're going. That's where it is right now, and I don't know how that influences everything. But it's interesting to watch all of that go on.
Yes, as a relationship, I think there is some strange echo. No, it's not there anymore. As a relationship counselor, my comment on what you've just said is that if I work with a couple where they are not on emergence assessment phase every day, I'm going to explain what I mean, and they are not on divorce or not divorce every day. That's what I mean by assessment phase. If they are not, but they say they are married, and despite the crisis, they are working not to divorce, not because divorcing is something they will be blamed for, judged, like our idea of the Middle Ages or some bigot society, not because of that. And I really want to emphasize, not because of that, but because of healthy boundaries that we all need. I often say to couples, if you are on assessment phase every day, every single thing that he does or she does will continue to wind you up, and you're gonna feel outraged. And you also know every time that a mistake is done, as opposed to forgiving, and then you feed yourself with the outrage, and you have no space to appreciate. And appreciation, in my practice, I've realized, is the number one ingredient. When that's not there, and of course, when you're in a crisis, it's difficult to appreciate what the other person does, and you end up always mentioning what they don't do or don't say, or do or say wrongly. But the importance of boundaries, whether they are monogamy, whether they are, I suppose that is the main one. And their roles are the second one, these two boundaries. So what's fair to expect from a man? What's fair to expect from a woman? Otherwise, we are setting each other up for failure. If you're expecting that I am a mother as opposed to a father, and that I am as caring as a mother, you're setting me up for failure. I can become a man who is more empathetic and more caring, but I can't become a mother. So what's the difference between a man's way of caring and a woman's way of caring for children? Because, and I'm going to end on this, I often hear women saying, I just can't get over seeing how little care he has. I'm desperate to see him playing with the children and showing some empathy or listening to me. And it's sad, because there is obviously some truth in that. But why did they get to this place where he's lost his confidence and he's not attuned to his feelings, and perhaps he feels, criticized and judged? Something to be continued.
Very interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting. If I could add to that, from the book I wrote, I've been reading and researching, and I'm just amazed at how much every day, I discover, wow, this is here in this book. But there's something you said that really is very powerful. and that is in the foundation of relationship. So when you come into a relationship and you don't, there's a milestone that you go past and never go past it again. When you go past the milestone of the assessment phase, you should go past it, celebrate it, and never ever come back to it again. Even when you get into marriage, you never ever come back to the milestone of assessment phase. But sadly, for some reason, even after we've got married, we still come back to the phase where we are assessing, is this person good enough? And what that does is you never ever transition to the place of gratitude and appreciation if you keep coming back to assessment phase, because naturally the tendency for the assessment phase is, if it's not what suits me, it triggers me. And you cannot have appreciation when your mindset for the negative is triggered. The assessment phase, once you go past that phase, what should happen next is a coin. One phase is, this is what I have to live with, but both of us together can work on it, make it more acceptable for me. Or the other phase is, these are the good things and I am grateful for this. And you want to enjoy your marriage based on enjoying the things that you're grateful for, that are the good things. And then that should lead to going into the negative areas and reducing it by making them work out good for you, so you have more things to enjoy. And that harkens back to the issue, the conference we're having in Nigeria, about entitlement. And so one of the things entitlement does is to make you sit back and say, I'm not going to work with that. I don't owe you a responsibility to reduce what's on the negative side, so there's more on the positive side. That's the entitlement mentality, and that's behind a lot of the negative things we're seeing in relationship. I also think that there's a positive in the cultural change, but I think we're also losing it to some extent. The cultural change, where it was a little bit of cultural for the man to not have a feeling, not play with the kids, not be helpful with house chores or stuff like that. It was a little bit cultural, from the past. And so a little bit of the Western culture, and we've said a lot of negative things, but one positive thing it did was that it changed that. So for instance, you take out the trash. If the dog barks at night or wants to go pee, you go do that. So it becomes the man's role, and that kind of put a responsibility on the man to play a part in the well-being of the marriage, and not just leave all of those things, especially things about the house, to the wife. That was a good positive thing. But then I think I don't know how we're losing that to some extent, going by some of the numbers we're seeing. Hopefully, as we talk, we can bring up some more of these issues and see where it goes.
Yes, very stimulating chat. I agree. It would be good to have some women in the next chat and to continue on these threads.
Yeah. So you bring in one, I bring in one woman. We'll see. I'm pretty sure I can bring in one or